Welcome to Live from the Artisan Studio. Our featured guest tonight, like a lot of other residents of Iowa City, hails from the Chicago suburbs, right? Woo! And he is no stranger to Brucemore, and we'll find out a little more about that later. But ladies and gentlemen, Brian Johannesen.
Thank you very much. This first song is a true story about something that happened to me during the pandemic. Well, I was walking through the woods a couple weeks ago when a sight done startled me. It was a full whale carcass sitting in the ash and the oak and the hickory. It was big and bloated and ugly as sin and half covered over with leaves. There's a squirrel running around, he was pulling acorns right out of his baleen. Now baleen is what whales have instead of teeth. It's kind of like a toothbrush. So I kept on a-walking cause I didn't have no reception on my cell phone. And Mama always told me if you find a whale carcass in the woods, best leave it alone. And I'm Midwestern, so it's just in my blood to go on and mind my own. But I can't help but thinking about the whale in the woods and what the hell went wrong. I'm walking around wondering, what in the world? Maybe his body was dropped from an airplane on the way to some sea world. Maybe he jumped so high that the wind done caught him in a hurricane and gave him a whirl. Maybe it was maybe he just up and walked straight out the water chasing a fine-finned girl. There's a lot of options. That word you just heard is fine-finned. You see, fins are what whales have instead of arms. Well, a couple days later, I went to my shrink. She asked what the hell's the matter with me. Said it's a big long list, but something so strange just happened to me last week. I told her about the whale, and she asked what that could mean about what's inside my brain. I told her I didn't know, but if you asked me last week about a guy who saw a whale in the woods, I'd have told you he's insane. I'm walking around wondering, what in the world? Maybe his body was dropped from an airplane on the way to some sea world. Maybe he jumped so high that the wind done caught him in a hurricane and gave him a whirl. Maybe he just up and walked straight out the water chasing a fine-finned girl. I'm walking around wondering, what in the hell? Maybe I walked past a witch in the woods there and she cast some funky spell. Maybe that whale was real, and to tell you the truth, I figure it might as well. Maybe it was the middle of a pandemic and I hadn't had any human interaction in a while. I was going just a little bit crazy and my brain just needed a little story to tell. Thank you. I'm getting both of my pandemic songs out of the way right off the top. I made this decision that every artist could only write one pandemic song. Otherwise, it would just be too much. And so I wrote this one in April of 2020, thinking I better get mine in before it's over. And, so I had to write another one later. This is based on a newspaper article I read about a woman who gave birth in a Walmart in Springfield, Missouri, in the toilet paper aisle. It was during the toilet paper phase, if you guys remember that. I was born on the floor of a Walmart. Some say at the end of the world. They rolled my mama out in a shopping cart, clutching her new baby girl. And I was sanitized like a bathroom. I was wiped down and soaped up and rinsed. The nurses all wore the same costume, each one in a fight to exist. Some said you should name her Corona, with their tongues pressed hard in their cheeks. They all laughed around Springfield, Missouri, and none of them died in their sleep. I was in a really dark space in April of 2020. Well, my dad didn't know Mom was pregnant, but he really didn't seem too surprised, except that his name was even mentioned, except that my mama had died. And the neighbors all looked on in judgment, said I brought a curse on their homes, hoarding supplies in their basements and wasting away all alone. And some said you should name her Corona, with their tongues pressed hard in their cheeks. They all laughed around Springfield, Missouri, and none of them died in their sleep. Well, by the time that the dust had all settled, tumbleweeds rolled through the town. The number of dead had been triple what the experts had warned them about. And my daddy stood out in a cornfield, the world all tattered and torn, his hair whipped around like a pinwheel, his angel of death in his arms. And some said you should name her Corona, with their tongues pressed hard in their cheeks. They all laughed around Springfield, Missouri, and none of them died in their sleep. They all laughed around Springfield, Missouri, and none of them died in their sleep.